How's it going, everybody? It's the CDH Warrior, and this is CDH. We survived this, now what? So, let's roll the title. So, for those that have been following this series, we've been going through social aspects of CDH. That's what last week started. And we're going to go through elementary, junior high, high school, and adult. Just to kind of give a guide of what can happen. I'm not stating that my experience is completely normal for somebody with CDH. I was homeschooled from 4th grade on. So, can I explain much about dealing with it in junior high in a public school setting? No. I can just give you my understanding of what I've been through from my perspective. So, with that out of the way, we're starting with elementary school. And the reason why we're starting there and not even slightly younger, and when I state elementary school, I'm really dealing with the 7 through 10 age range. When you're younger, it's not really that big of a deal. It's one of those that's around the time you start having people notice differences. What can be things that you can deal with? Most people don't realize it, but yes, our scars are pretty much covered up. But that doesn't mean that there aren't physical differences between us. I mean, in elementary and junior high, I was physically awkward. I was not tall by any means, but I was physically awkward as an adult. So, to start off, when you're dealing with CDH, dealing with one of your biggest things is going to be about dealing with all the scar tissue, and you're worried somewhat. You're not getting into the age where people worry about how you look. It's, oh, this guy has cool scars. And it's one that tends to be a standard at that point, is your scarring is cool and interesting and fun, and people want to know more about it. And as a kid, it can be overwhelming. Now, I'm not stating this is... All I'm stating is this is just my experience with stuff. There are others that have had different experiences. If you have had different experiences with this, share them in the comments, and don't be afraid to jump in. So, my goal with this series, and we're going to go through, like I said, we're going through elementary, junior high, high school, college, transitioning into the workplace. Once we get to high school, things are going to get kind of odd. Junior high, high school, probably between 11 and 14 is where my life kind of got weird. But that's not what this is. We'll explore that in more detail next week. For this week, it's more the elementary school age. It's one, how do you fit in socially? It's one that a lot of people tend to ignore the question of, or ignore the comment of, you look completely normal. Yes, from a physical perspective, without seeing what we've been through, yes, we somewhat seem normal physically. But that's not always the case. There's points where you can tell a difference in social, developmental, all kinds of different milestones that people miss. I'll admit, when I was in elementary school, my handwriting sucked. It still does, to this day. But it's legible now. It used to be one of those that you couldn't even read my own handwriting. Heck, half the time, I couldn't even read my own handwriting. And I'd have to literally rewrite and end up getting failed on tests because I couldn't read my handwriting, nor could the teachers. Thank God everything's on computers now. I was born about 5 years too late. Or 5 years too early. But that's not necessarily the point of this video. The point is looking at the social aspect, and it's one we started talking about the social aspect, and do you appear normal? Yes, from a physical perspective, you do appear normal unless people see all the scar tissue. It is one, I make no bones about it. I have a complete cooking channel that I show off my scar tissue. It's not that big of a deal to me now. But elementary school, you're young and you're not paying attention to the social dilemmas. I don't know exactly if that's the way I want to phrase that, but I'll explain as we get further in. There's not so much of the physical worry. How do you look physically? How different are you from your peers? I'll admit, it's a struggle even now. I do not look that great. And it's not that we're out of shape. We can play sports. We can do a lot of the things normal kids can do. But you also have to worry about some of the physical issues. Around that time is when it starts becoming apparent that you may or may not be able to physically keep up with your peers. And I state that from the perspective that you may not physically equal everyone around you. you may not be able to keep up. Your lung capacity may not be able to allow you to keep up with your peers. Is that necessarily a bad thing? Yes and no. I mean, it's not always a terrible thing, but it also tends to be a bit on the unusual side. It tends to sometimes put you on the outside looking in. It's one, I will explain how that can get worse as you get older. Especially in junior high. I ended up having a very bizarre junior high year. Junior high and high school transition was very weird for me. But that will be touched on next week. But elementary school in general was pretty easy for me. It wasn't perfect. It wasn't always the best scenario, but it was okay. I had friends. I was relatively social. I was awkward. I had sensory integration disorder on top of CDH, so I was very physically awkward. I was in speech therapy. I was in OT. And to be honest, I don't see that. I see some of it definitely helped, but not all of it. And that's not a knock on anyone, to be honest. That's just reality. I feel that looking back on that, we want to put 6 to 9, 6 to 10, roughly, was an awkward phase. Elementary school years were pretty easy for me. There wasn't a whole lot of obvious back and forth, a whole lot of obvious. I wasn't an outcast. I'll just put it that way because I'm not sure exactly how to phrase what I'm thinking. I was social. I was in all kinds of different. I couldn't do sports, but that was more because of a seizure disorder instead of my CDH in and of itself. But I was in all kinds of other things. I was in Cub Scouts. I was in choir, in chorus. I was in I'm going to call it a youth group, although that wasn't exactly what it was, because it was kind of that church group for the six to 10-year-old age group on Sunday evenings. But it's one. I grew up in South Georgia, so dealing with the heat, dealing with the humidity, it was tough, but I got through it. It wasn't bad. Could it be harsh to grow up that way? Well, not grow up that way. Could it be harsh to have lung problems in that region? I'll be honest. I honestly don't think it was. The only real issue that had an effect on my lungs at that point was really more the insane pollen from the pine trees. Because that was pretty much all it was you and the pine trees. But in general, that was a good time. That was really straightforward. There wasn't a whole lot of back and forth and worries and popularity contests, and we were just kids. We existed. And that was fine. But it's one... I think I want to go through and find a chart that kind of explains age groups, and that way I can kind of go through age group by age group. I mean, we already jumped through preschool and elementary, so I don't think there's too much to add to that. I may add some to the end of elementary, started junior high, but that's about the extent of it in the next video. But I think that is where people misunderstand CDH and assume that we're not able to equal our peers. And that's not all. It's not always the case that we're able to keep up, but for the most part, there's not much you can't do. You're pretty much limited by your imagination, and that's about it. Can physical issues become a problem? Yeah, to some extent. But it's not the main issue. You're not worrying constantly about the physical issues. And I'll touch on junior high and high school, junior high next week. But I figured this was a good place to start with CDH and dealing with CDH as a kid as opposed to like a preteen or a teenager. And I'll go all the way up to now. So there's probably going to be at least 4 videos of this. To be honest, you can't really tell a lot of the delays in age with CDH. I mean, I was pretty on par with my peers at my age, even with some of my health issues. So, I do not know what's in the air. And yes, the noise you can hear in the back is the cat snoring. Good grief, she's loud. But anyway, that's all I have for this week. Next week we'll go into junior high preteen, junior high. So this is going to somewhat overlap, but preteen being, I don't know what the age ranges are. I'll kind of put a list to the side at the end of the, probably in these last few minutes of the video. Probably over on this side with the lamp. But that's all I've got for this week. So, for the CDH Warrior, this has been CDH. We survived this. Now what? Have a great day, and I will see you next week.